The scent of lye soap had long since stopped burning Grace Vandermeer's nostrils, though her hands told a different story, cracked and raw from years of scrubbing other people's linens in the unforgiving New Mexico sun. She stood at the edge of Hillsborough's Main Street in the summer of 1878, a wicker basket balanced on her hip, watching the dust devils dance between the wooden storefronts as she contemplated how her life had become this endless cycle of wash, rinse, and wring. 3 years had passed since Thomas died in the silver mines, leaving her with nothing but debts and a wedding ring she had sold within the first month just to eat. The boarding house where she rented a corner room charged $2 a week, and most days she barely scraped together enough to cover it. Her customers were reliable, at least. The saloon girls paid her 50 cents weekly to keep their dresses presentable. The general store owner gave her 20 cents for his shirts, and a handful of miners sent their clothes her way when they could afford it. It was not much, but it kept her fed, and in Hillsborough that counted as a blessing. Grace pushed a strand of dark brown hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear as she made her way toward the creek that ran behind the old church. At 25, she felt decades older, worn down by grief and labor in equal measure. The other women in town treated her with a mixture of pity and suspicion, as if widowhood might be contagious, and the men either ignored her completely or looked at her in ways that made her skin crawl. She had learned to keep her eyes down and her words few. The creek was running low this time of year, barely more than a trickle over smooth stones, but it was enough for washing. She knelt on the bank, her knees sinking into the damp earth, and began sorting through the clothes in her basket. 3 shirts from the blacksmith, 2 dresses from the schoolteacher, and a pile of handkerchiefs from the doctor. She reached for the first shirt when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Grace did not turn around immediately. Riders came and went through Hillsborough constantly, and most of them had no business with her. But these hoofbeats slowed, then stopped, and she felt the weight of someone's attention on her back like a physical thing. "Excuse me, madam," a man's voice called out. It was a deep voice, polite but confident, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent years under open skies. She turned slowly, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. The man sat astride a large roan horse, and even backlit as he was, she could make out broad shoulders and the silhouette of a wide-brimmed hat. He dismounted with easy grace, and as he stepped closer, the sun caught his features. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His face was tanned and weathered, but handsome in a way that suggested he did not spend much time thinking about it. "I am looking for someone who does washing," he said, removing his hat. "The man at the general store said I might find you here." Grace stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "That would be me, Grace Vandermeer." "Sam Anderson," he replied, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she shook it, acutely aware of how rough her palm must feel against his. "I just bought the old Thornton Ranch about 5 miles north of town. Been working on fixing it up for the past month, and I have got to admit, my domestic skills leave something to be desired." The clothes situation has gotten a bit desperate. Despite herself, Grace felt a small smile tug at her lips. How desperate? "Well, I have been wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation for about 6 weeks now, and I am fairly certain one of them could walk to the creek on its own at this point." The unexpected humor caught her off guard, and she actually laughed, a rusty sound she barely recognized. "That does sound desperate." "I am willing to pay well," Sam continued, his expression turning more serious. "I know washing is hard work, and I have got quite a bit of it." "Would 50 cents a week be fair?" Maybe more if the volume is too much. 50 cents a week from one customer was excellent money, more than she made from most of her clients combined. Grace studied his face, searching for any sign of ulterior motives, but saw only earnestness and perhaps a touch of embarrassment about the state of his laundry. 50 cents is more than fair, she said carefully. When would you need me to start? Would today be too soon? He grinned sheepishly. I was not joking about the shirts. Grace nodded. I can come by tomorrow morning to collect everything and bring it back in a few days. Or if you prefer, you can bring it to me at the boarding house on 3rd Street. I will bring it to you, Sam said, settling his hat back on his head. Save you the ride out. Is 8 o'clock too early? 8 o'clock is fine. He swung back into the saddle with practiced ease, then paused, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. Thank you, Mrs. Vandermeer, I appreciate it. It is just missed now, she said quietly. My husband passed some time ago. Something shifted in his eyes, a softness that might have been sympathy or understanding. I am sorry for your loss, he said simply, and then he was gone, riding back toward the main road in a cloud of dust. Grace returned to her washing, but her mind was no longer on the task. She found herself thinking about Sam Anderson, about the way he had looked at her, like she was a person rather than a ghost or an object. It had been so long since anyone had treated her with simple kindness that she had almost forgotten what it felt like, true to his word. Sam appeared at the boarding house at 8 o'clock the next morning, leading a pack horse laden with an impressive amount of laundry. Grace was waiting on the front porch, and she could not help but raise her eyebrows at the sight. You are not exaggerating, she said. Afraid not. He began unloading bundles of clothes, stacking them near her feet. There are shirts, trousers, union suits, socks, a few blankets that have seen better days. I try to keep things organized, but no promises. Grace knelt beside the nearest bundle, mentally calculating how long this would take her. It was at least 3 days of work, maybe 4. This is quite a lot. I might need to charge you 75 cents for this much. Make it $1, Sam said. That is a fair price for the amount, and honestly, you would be saving my life. I was starting to think I might need to just burn everything and start over. $1 it is then. She began moving the bundles inside, and Sam helped her without being asked, carrying the heavier loads through the narrow doorway of the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher, the landlady, watched from the kitchen with undisguised curiosity. When everything was inside Grace's small room, Sam stood in the doorway, too polite to enter uninvited. The room was sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk, and a single chair. Clothes hung drying on a line strung across one corner. When should I come back? He asked. Friday morning. That should give me enough time. Friday it is. He tipped his hat to her and left, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs. Mrs. Fletcher appeared almost immediately, her round face flushed with interest. Who was that? A new customer, Grace replied evenly. He bought the Thornton place. Sam Anderson, yes, I have heard about him. Came up from Texas with money, apparently. Bought that ranch outright, no bank loan. Mrs. Fletcher's eyes gleamed with the look of someone about to share choice gossip. Word is he is looking to build it into something substantial. Good prospects for a man his age. Grace had learned long ago not to encourage Mrs. Fletcher's gossiping, so she simply nodded and began sorting through Sam's laundry. The landlady eventually wandered off, disappointed by her lack of response. The clothes told their own story. Sam was not wealthy, despite what Mrs. Fletcher had heard. His shirts were well made but old, carefully mended in several places. His trousers were sturdy work pants, worn thin at the knees. Everything was dusty and sweat-stained, but not deliberately neglected. These were the clothes of a man who worked hard and made do with what he had, someone who spent his money on his ranch rather than his wardrobe. Grace spent the next 3 days washing everything with meticulous care. She scrubbed stains on her washboard, boiled the union suits and socks in her largest pot, and hung everything to dry on the lines behind the boarding house. She even mended a tear in one of the shirts and sewed a button back onto a pair of trousers, though he had not asked her to do so. Friday morning arrived hot and clear. Grace had everything clean, dried, and neatly folded in the same bundles Sam had brought them in. She was checking her work for the third time when she heard his knock at the door. "Come in," she called. Sam entered, removing his hat. He wore one of the shirts that had not been in the wash load, and it looked about as desperate as he had described. "Morning, Miss Vandermeer." "Good morning. Everything is ready." She gestured to the bundles stacked on her bed. He walked over and picked up the first shirt, unfolding it to examine her work. His eyebrows rose slightly. "This is excellent. Better than excellent, actually, and you fixed the tear." It seemed like it needed doing. "That was not part of our arrangement." He pulled a coin purse from his pocket and counted out not one but $2 silver, placing them on her washstand. "The extra is for the mending." "That is too much," Grace protested. "It is exactly right." His tone was firm but not unkind. Quality work deserves fair payment. They loaded the clothes back onto his pack horse, working in comfortable silence. When everything was secured, Sam hesitated, his hand resting on his saddle horn. "Would you be willing to do this regularly?" he asked. "Once a week, maybe." "I can bring you laundry every Friday and pick it up the following week." "I would be happy to," Grace said, meaning it. "Good. That is real good." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. "I will see you next Friday, then." As she watched him ride away, Grace realized she was looking forward to it, which surprised her. She had grown so accustomed to dreading her days that the simple anticipation of something pleasant felt almost foreign. The arrangement continued through the rest of the summer and into autumn. Every Friday, Sam would arrive with his week's worth of laundry, and they would spend a few minutes talking while he unloaded it. Every Monday, he would return to collect it, sometimes staying for half an hour or more, sitting on the porch steps and telling her about the progress on his ranch. He was rebuilding the house, he told her, replacing rotten floorboards and patching the roof. He had bought 10 head of cattle and was hoping to expand the herd. He had hired 2 hands to help with the work, brothers from Colorado who knew their business. He talked about his plans to dig a proper well and build a new barn before winter set in. Grace found herself talking too, more than she had in years. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about how she and Thomas had come west with dreams of prosperity. She talked about Thomas's death in a way she never had with anyone else, the sudden senselessness of it when the mine shaft collapsed, taking him and 7 other men into the darkness. She even mentioned how the mine owners had paid the widows $20 each and considered the matter closed. "That is criminal," Sam said, his jaw tight. $20 for a man's life. "That is just how things are out here," Grace replied with a shrug she did not feel. "Life is cheap when you are poor. It should not be that way. No, it should not, but wishing does not change much." As autumn deepened into winter, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Sam began arriving with small gifts, nothing expensive or inappropriate, just thoughtful gestures. A jar of honey from a farmer he had traded with. A new bar of glycerin soap, gentler on hands than the harsh lye she used. A pair of work gloves lined with soft cotton. "You do not need to bring me things," Grace said when he presented her with a wool shawl one particularly cold November morning. "I know I do not need to," Sam replied. "I want to. You work so hard, Grace. Let someone do something nice for you once in a while." It was the first time he had called her by her first name, and the intimacy of it sent a flutter through her chest that she tried to ignore. She could not afford to develop feelings for Sam Anderson. He was a customer, nothing more, and even if he were interested in her, which seemed unlikely, she had nothing to offer a man like him. She was worn out, poor, damaged goods by any reasonable measure. He would eventually find a younger, prettier woman to marry, someone who could give him children and a proper home, but her heart did not seem to care about logic. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way he laughed or the careful way he handled his horse. She began taking extra care with her appearance on Fridays and Mondays, pinning her hair more neatly and wearing her better dress, the dark blue one that did not have any visible patches. December brought the first snow, heavy wet flakes that turned Hillsborough's streets into muddy rivers. Sam showed up on Friday morning covered in snow, his horse steaming in the cold air. "Rough ride?" Grace asked, ushering him inside where it was marginally warmer. "Getting rougher. The road north is going to be impassable soon." He stamped his boots on the mat, trying to dislodge the worst of the mud. "I have been thinking, once the heavy snows come, it might not make sense for me to keep making this trip every week. But I had another idea if you are willing to hear it." Grace felt her stomach drop. Of course. He was going to end their arrangement. It made perfect sense. She had been foolish to think it would continue indefinitely. "What is your idea? What if you came out to the ranch?" He said it quickly, like he had been rehearsing. "Just during the winter months when travel is difficult. You could stay in the spare room I have fixed up. Do the washing there, along with any other household tasks you would be willing to take on. Cooking, maybe, and general housekeeping. I would pay you $15 a month plus room and board." Grace stared at him. $15 a month was more money than she currently made in 3 months. It was an astonishing offer, almost too good to be true, which made her suspicious. "What would people say?" she asked carefully. "A widow living alone with an unmarried man." Sam's face colored. "I thought about that. We could ask Reverend Matthews to sort of oversee the arrangement, make it respectable. And my 2 ranch hands live in the bunkhouse, so it would not be just the 2 of us on the property. I am not suggesting anything improper. You would have complete privacy and safety." "I give you my word on that." She believed him. That was the surprising part. Despite years of learning to distrust men's intentions, she believed Sam Anderson when he said he meant her no harm. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." But she could see the disappointment in his eyes as he handed over his laundry and left. Grace spent the next 2 days wrestling with the decision. $15 a month would change her life. She could save money, maybe eventually have enough to rent a better place or even start a small business of her own. The work would be no harder than what she already did, probably easier with access to the ranch's resources. And if she was being honest with herself, the prospect of seeing Sam every day rather than twice a week held a dangerous appeal. But moving to his ranch felt like a line she could not uncross. Right now, they were customer and laundress, a respectable if friendly business relationship. Living under his roof, even with all the proper precautions, would change that dynamic irrevocably. And what would happen when he inevitably found a woman to marry? She would have to leave, find new work, start over again. On the other hand, what future did she have in Hillsborough? She was slowly starving on her current income, 1 bad month away from complete destitution. At least at the ranch, she would be warm and fed through the winter. That alone might be worth the risk. Sunday evening, she walked to the small house behind the church where Reverend Matthews lived with his wife. The Reverend was a kind man in his 50s, one of the few people in town who had consistently treated her with respect. "Grace, what a pleasant surprise," he said, inviting her in. "Come in out of the cold. Martha just made coffee." She sat in their modest parlor and explained Sam's offer and her concerns about propriety. The Reverend listened carefully, his wife nodding along from her rocking chair. "I know Sam Anderson," Reverend Matthews said when she finished. "He has been attending services regularly since he arrived in Hillsborough. He seems to be a good man, honest and hardworking. If he has given you his word that the arrangement would be respectful, I am inclined to believe him." "But what will people say?" Grace pressed. "Mrs." Matthews spoke up for the first time. "People always say something, dear. If you live your life worrying about gossip, you will never do anything at all. The question is whether you trust this man and whether the opportunity is good for you." "I do trust him," Grace admitted. "I am just not sure I trust my own judgment anymore." "Your judgment seems perfectly sound to me," the Reverend said gently. "You have survived 3 years on your own in circumstances that would have broken many people. You have worked hard and maintained your dignity. If you think this position would improve your situation, I see no moral objection to it. And if it would ease your mind, I would be happy to ride out to the ranch periodically during the winter, just to make sure everything is as it should be." Grace left their house feeling both reassured and terrified. That night, she barely slept, turning the decision over and over in her mind. By Monday morning, she had made her choice. Sam arrived to collect his laundry looking anxious, like he had not slept much either. Grace let him load up the clean clothes before she spoke. "I've thought about your offer," she said. "If it still stands, I would like to accept." His face broke into a wide smile. "Really, you mean it?" "I do. When would you want me to start? Is this week too soon?" "I know you probably need time to settle your affairs here. This week is fine. I do not have many affairs to settle." It was true. She could pack her few belongings in an hour and be ready to leave. They agreed that he would come for her on Thursday morning. That gave her 3 days to inform Mrs. Fletcher she was leaving, collect payment from her other customers, and prepare for the move. Mrs. Fletcher was predictably scandalized, but Grace paid her the final week's rent and ignored the lecture about reputation and foolishness. Her other customers were mostly indifferent, already making plans to find a new laundress. Thursday morning arrived cold and bright. Grace stood on the boarding house porch with her trunk and a cloth bag containing her washboard, soap, and other supplies. She wore her warmest dress and the shawl Sam had given her, and despite her nervousness, she felt a flutter of excitement. Sam pulled up with a wagon rather than his horse, a thoughtful touch that meant she did not have to worry about her trunk. "Morning, Grace. Ready? Ready as I will ever be." He loaded her things into the wagon bed and helped her onto the bench seat, then clicked to the horses. As they rolled out of Hillsborough, Grace looked back at the town that had been her home for 3 years. She felt no particular sadness at leaving it. The ranch was about an hour's ride north, and Sam kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. "That ridge over there is where the Apache used to have their summer camps before the army moved them. Sometimes you can still find arrowheads if you look carefully. And that creek we are crossing now runs year-round, which is one reason I wanted this land. Reliable water is worth more than gold out here." The ranch itself appeared as they crested a low hill. It was larger than Grace had expected, with a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, and several smaller outbuildings spread across a valley between 2 pine-covered slopes. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney, and she could see cattle grazing in a fenced pasture. "It is not much yet," Sam said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it is coming along." "It looks wonderful," Grace said honestly. Compared to the cramped boarding house, the ranch looked like a paradise. The house was a simple structure, 2 stories with a covered porch running along the front. Sam helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with obvious bachelor practicality. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a cast iron stove at the other. A rough-hewn table and 4 chairs occupied the center, and a few shelves held dishes and supplies. "Your room is upstairs," Sam said, leading the way up a narrow staircase. "There are 2 bedrooms up here. I took the smaller one, figured you should have the larger space." The room he showed her was simply furnished but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small mirror on the wall. A window looked out over the front pasture, and someone had hung curtains, simple cotton but cheerful. "I bought those curtains from the general store," Sam admitted. "Thought the room should look more welcoming. If you do not like them, we can change them." "They are perfect," Grace said, running her hand over the fabric. "Thank you, Sam, for all of this." He ducked his head, looking pleased but embarrassed. "I will let you get settled. Come down when you are ready, and I will show you where everything is." After he left, Grace sat on the bed, testing its firmness. It was the nicest bed she had slept in since leaving Pennsylvania. The whole room was nicer than anywhere she had lived in years. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses on pegs behind the door and arranging her hairbrush and pins on the dresser. It took less than 10 minutes, and then the room looked barely occupied, but it was hers. Downstairs, Sam showed her the kitchen supplies, apologizing for their limited nature. "I have basic staples: flour, beans, salt, coffee, some bacon, and potatoes. I usually ride into town once a month for supplies, but if you need anything special, just let me know." "This will be fine," Grace assured him. "I am used to making do." Over the next few days, they fell into a comfortable routine. Grace woke early to start breakfast, cooking oatmeal or eggs for Sam and his 2 ranch hands, Jesse and Tom Harper. The brothers were quiet men in their 30s, polite to Grace but clearly uncertain how to interact with a woman in their previously all-male domain. After breakfast, the men would head out to work on various ranch projects while Grace tackled the washing, cleaning, and cooking. The work was hard but satisfying. Sam had rigged up a proper laundry area in a shed behind the house, with a large basin and a system for heating water that was far superior to her setup at the boarding house. She could do in one day what used to take her 3. The extra time she spent cooking proper meals, cleaning the house thoroughly, and even attempting some baking. Sam was unfailingly kind and respectful, never entering her room without permission and always treating her with courtesy. But Grace could not help noticing small things. The way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. How he always seemed to position himself nearby when she was working, finding tasks that kept him close. The careful way he never touched her, even accidentally, as if he were afraid of overstepping. She found herself watching him too, noticing the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he chopped wood. The unconscious grace with which he moved, economical and sure. The rare smile that lit his face when something pleased him. She was falling in love with him, had probably been falling for months, and the realization terrified her. Christmas approached, and with it came heavy snows that effectively isolated the ranch from town. Grace had worried she might feel trapped, but instead, she felt strangely content. The days had a peaceful rhythm, and the evenings were spent near the fireplace, with Sam reading aloud from his small collection of books while she mended clothes or knitted. "My mother taught me to read," he told her one night. "She was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She always said education was the one thing no one could take away from you." "What happened to your parents?" Grace asked gently. "Father died when I was 15. Horse kicked him in the head. Mother followed a year later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think it was more heartbreak. They loved each other something fierce." He stared into the fire, his expression distant. "That is the kind of marriage I want someday, the kind where you cannot imagine life without the other person." Grace's throat tightened. "That is a rare thing. I know. But I would rather be alone than settle for less." He looked at her then, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "What about you? Were you and your husband happy?" It was a question no one had ever asked her, and Grace had to think about her answer. "We were content, I suppose. Thomas was a good man, steady and reliable. But I was very young when we married, barely 18, and I do not think I really knew what I wanted from life. We did not have time to build the kind of partnership you are talking about." "Do you miss him?" "I miss the security of being married. I miss not having to face the world alone. But if I am being honest, I do not miss Thomas himself as much as I probably should." "Does that make me terrible?" "It makes you honest." Sam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Grace, can I ask you something?" Her heart began to pound. "Of course." "Have you ever thought about marrying again?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Grace chose her words carefully. "I have not had much opportunity to think about it. Most men see widows as either objects of pity or women of questionable virtue. No one has shown any interest in me as a potential wife. I find that hard to believe. Do you?" "Yes." He stood abruptly and crossed to the window, looking out at the snow-covered darkness. "Grace, I am not very good with words. I can talk all day about cattle and feed costs, but when it comes to matters of the heart, I get all tangled up. So I am just going to say this plainly. I have feelings for you, strong feelings. I think I started developing them the first day I met you at the creek, and they have just grown stronger every week since then." Grace could not speak. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Sam continued, his words coming faster now. "I asked you to come here for the winter partly because it made practical sense, but mostly because I could not stand the thought of going months without seeing you. And I know I am probably making a fool of myself right now, and you are going to tell me you only see me as an employer, but I had to tell you the truth. I care about you, Grace, more than I have ever cared about anyone." She stood on shaking legs and crossed the room to stand beside him at the window. "Sam, look at me." He turned, his face vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I have feelings for you too," she said softly. "I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish and that nothing could come of it. But my heart would not listen." Hope flared in his eyes. "Really, really." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Can I kiss you, please?" she whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he were afraid she might shatter. But when Grace pressed closer, wrapping her arms around his neck, it deepened into something urgent and real. Years of loneliness seemed to melt away in that moment, replaced by warmth and connection and the electric thrill of being wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Grace." She laughed, giddy with emotion. "You are supposed to court me first." "Why? We have been courting for months in our own way. I love you. I want you to be my wife. Unless you need more time, in which case I will wait however long you want. But I am warning you right now that I am going to be thinking about this every single day and probably making a pest of myself. What will people say?" But even as she asked, she found she did not care very much about the answer. "They will say I am the luckiest man in New Mexico. Please, Grace, say yes." She thought about the life she would be choosing. Days of hard work, certainly, but work she would do alongside a man she loved. Nights by the fire, talking and laughing and building something together. Children, maybe, if they were blessed. A home that was truly hers, not a rented room but a place where she belonged. It was everything she had stopped letting herself dream about. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Sam let out a whoop and spun her around, making her laugh. When he set her down, he was grinning like a boy. "We will do it right. I will take you into town as soon as the road's clear, buy you a proper ring, have the ceremony at the church. Whatever you want." "I just want you," Grace said simply. "Everything else is just details." They sat up talking until the fire burned down to embers, making plans and sharing stories and stealing kisses like teenagers. Grace learned that Sam had been saving money for years to buy his own ranch, working as a cowboy on various spreads across Texas and New Mexico. He had chosen Hillsboro because the land was affordable and the area was growing. He wanted to build not just a working ranch but a legacy, something to pass down to future generations. "I want a lot of children," he admitted. "Growing up as an only child after my parents died was lonely. I want a house full of noise and life." "How many is a lot?" Grace asked, amused. "5. 6, however many we are blessed with." He looked suddenly worried. "Unless you do not want children, I should have asked." "I want children," she assured him. "I had given up on the idea, but yes, I want them very much." The roads did not clear for another 3 weeks, which suited them both fine. They spent Christmas together, just the 4 of them since Jessie and Tom had nowhere else to go. Grace cooked a feast with a chicken Sam had been saving and made pies from dried apples. They exchanged simple gifts. Sam gave her a book of poetry, the pages still crisp and new, and Grace gave him a scarf she had knitted in secret. Jessie and Tom, who had figured out what was happening between their boss and the housekeeper, gave them their blessing in the form of a hand-carved wooden box for the wedding rings. Finally, in mid-January, a warm spell melted enough snow to make travel possible. Sam hitched up the wagon, and they rode into Hillsboro together. Grace's heart beat nervously as they pulled onto Main Street, wondering what kind of reception they would receive. Their first stop was Reverend Matthews, who greeted them warmly and seemed entirely unsurprised by their news. "I wondered if this might happen," he said with a knowing smile. "When do you want the ceremony?" "As soon as possible," Sam said, taking Grace's hand. "Tomorrow, if that can be arranged." "Tomorrow it is. 2 o'clock at the church." Next they went to the general store, where Sam bought Grace a simple gold band that fit perfectly. Mr. Peterson, the store owner, congratulated them with genuine warmth. Word spread quickly through the small town, and by the time they left the store, several people had stopped to offer their best wishes. If anyone disapproved of their hasty engagement, they kept it to themselves. That night, Grace stayed at the boarding house one last time, propriety demanding they spend their last night as unmarried people apart. Mrs. Fletcher was coolly polite, still disapproving but unable to criticize an actual engagement. Grace barely slept, too excited and nervous about the next day. The wedding was simple but perfect. Grace wore her best dress, dark blue with a white collar she had sewn on specially. Sam wore a new suit he had bought that morning, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothes. Jessie and Tom served as witnesses, along with Mrs. Matthews. A handful of townspeople attended, curious or kind or both. As Reverend Matthews led them through the vows, Grace felt tears pricking her eyes. When Sam slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand was shaking slightly. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss Sam gave her was sweet and chaste but filled with promise. The small congregation clapped, and Mrs. Matthews insisted they stay for cake she had baked. They spent an hour accepting congratulations and making small talk, but eventually Sam caught Grace's eye and nodded toward the door. "Time to go home, Mrs. Anderson." She liked the sound of that. Mrs. Anderson, Grace Anderson, a new name for a new life. The ride back to the ranch felt shorter than usual, perhaps because they spent most of it talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in a way only newlyweds could be. When they arrived, Jesse and Tom had made themselves scarce. A fire was burning in the house and someone had left a pot of stew warming on the stove. "They are good men," Sam said, nodding toward the bunkhouse. "They are," Grace agreed. An awkward silence fell as they both realized this was their wedding night. Grace felt suddenly nervous, aware that they had skipped several traditional steps in their courtship. Sam seemed to sense her anxiety. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said gently. "I can sleep downstairs tonight if you would prefer. I want you to feel comfortable." Grace took his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own. "I am your wife now, Sam. I want to be your wife in every way. I am just a bit nervous." "So am I," he admitted. "I have thought about this night a lot, and now that it is here, I am terrified of disappointing you," she smiled. "I do not think that is possible." He led her upstairs to his room, which he had clearly prepared with care. The bed was made with fresh linens. Candles were burning on the dresser, and he had even found some winter wildflowers somewhere and put them in a jar. The gesture was so sweet and unexpected that Grace felt her nervousness melt away. What followed was tender and somewhat awkward. Two people learning each other's bodies and preferences. Sam was gentle and patient, and if their wedding night lacked the practiced smoothness of experienced lovers, it made up for it in genuine emotion and care. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Grace's head resting on Sam's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." "I already know I will not," she replied. Winter gradually gave way to spring, and the ranch came alive with new growth and activity. Sam bought more cattle, expanding the herd to 30 head. He and the Harper brothers built a new fence line and repaired the barn roof. Grace planted a kitchen garden, coaxing seeds into life in the rich soil. She also began raising chickens, giving them a steady supply of eggs and occasionally a roasting bird. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm of work and companionship. Grace discovered that marriage to Sam was nothing like her first marriage. Thomas had been kind but distant, treating her like a housekeeper who occasionally warmed his bed. Sam treated her like a partner, asking her opinion on ranch decisions and valuing her input. They worked together on projects, talked for hours about their hopes and plans, and fell into bed each night exhausted but content. In late April, Grace began feeling ill in the mornings, a nausea that passed by midday but left her tired. She suspected what it meant but waited another few weeks to be sure before telling Sam. She chose a warm evening when they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "Sam, I have something to tell you." He looked over at her, immediately attentive. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I am going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "Really? You are sure?" "As sure as I can be. Probably due in November." He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in a careful hug. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Grace, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are not worried?" she asked. "About the expense or the extra work or anything? Worried? No. Excited, terrified, completely unprepared, yes to all of that. But not worried. We will figure it out together." He was true to his word. Over the following months, Sam threw himself into preparing for the baby with the same determination he brought to everything. He built a cradle from scratch, carving small designs into the headboard. He bought fabric from town so Grace could sew baby clothes. He read every book he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, much to her amusement. "Sam, women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she said one evening, watching him frown over a medical text. "I think I can manage. I just want to be prepared. What if something goes wrong? What if you need help and I do not know what to do?" His genuine fear touched her. "Then we will call for the doctor or the midwife. I will be fine. Women in my family have babies easily. My mother had 6 with no trouble." But as her pregnancy progressed and the baby grew large inside her, Grace sometimes felt her own moments of fear. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out here with limited medical care. Women died in labor all the time, leaving their babies motherless and their husbands widowed. She did not want to leave Sam alone, not now when they had finally found happiness. The Harper brothers proved unexpectedly helpful, having grown up in a large family. Tom's wife had died in childbirth years ago, which was why he never remarried, but he still remembered what had helped during her pregnancy. Jesse, the younger brother, was awkward but sweet, carving wooden toys for the baby and helping Grace with heavy tasks she could no longer manage. As autumn arrived and Grace grew large and uncomfortable, Sam became almost comically protective. He did not want her lifting anything or walking too far or standing too long. She finally had to put her foot down. "Sam Anderson, I am pregnant, not made of glass. I can still do normal tasks." "But what if you hurt yourself? Or the baby?" "I have been doing laundry and housework my entire adult life. I think I can handle it for a few more weeks." But secretly, she loved his concern. It felt good to be cared for so thoroughly, to have someone worried about her well-being. The baby came on a cold night in early November. Grace woke to contractions around midnight and shook Sam awake. He immediately panicked, fumbling to light the lamp and knocking it over in his haste. "Calm down," Grace said, even as another contraction gripped her. "Go get Mrs. Peterson from town. She is the midwife. And be careful on the road." Sam rode into town at a gallop and returned with Mrs. Peterson within the hour. The older woman took charge immediately, sending Sam downstairs with orders to boil water and stay out of the way. Jesse and Tom kept him company, trying to distract him from the sounds coming from above. Labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Grace had thought she knew what hard work was, but childbirth redefined the concept. The pain came in waves, each one stealing her breath and her ability to think. Mrs. Peterson coached her through it with professional calm, and through the haze of exhaustion, Grace found herself grateful for the woman's presence. Finally, as dawn light filtered through the window, the baby arrived with a lusty cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Peterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Grace's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Grace looked down at her son, at his red face and tiny fists, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Can I come up now?" Sam's anxious voice called from the bottom of the stairs. "Come meet your son," Grace called back, laughing weakly. Sam burst into the room, his face drawn with worry and exhaustion. When he saw Grace holding the baby, his expression transformed into wonder. He approached slowly, as if afraid to startle them. "Is he really ours?" Sam whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant grasped his finger with surprising strength. "He really is. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything. Sam looked at his son, then at Grace, then back at the baby. "What about Samuel, after my father? We can call him Sammy." "Sammy Anderson," Grace said, testing the name. "I like it." Mrs. Peterson stayed for 3 days, helping Grace learn to nurse the baby and recover from the birth. By the time she left, Grace felt more confident, though still exhausted. Newborns, it turned out, did not care much about their parents' need for sleep. Sam proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Sammy for hours when the baby was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow worked. He changed diapers without complaint and took over many of Grace's household tasks so she could rest. Watching him with their son, Grace fell in love with him all over again. The first year of Sammy's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, first teeth, and first steps. The ranch continued to grow, with Sam adding more cattle and hiring another hand to help manage the expanding operation. Money was still tight, but they were making progress, building something solid and sustainable. On their second anniversary, Sam surprised Grace with a gift. "I know you gave up everything to come here," he said, handing her a wrapped package. "Your friends, your independence, your own income. I wanted you to have something that was just yours." Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of ink pens. "I thought you might want to write down your thoughts or keep records or maybe write stories. I know you love to read, and I figured maybe you would like to write too." "How did you know?" Grace asked, touched beyond words. She had always enjoyed writing but had not done any since Thomas died, too busy just surviving. "I notice things about you," Sam said simply. "Every little thing." Grace began writing in her journal regularly, recording the daily life of the ranch, her thoughts on motherhood, and the small moments of happiness that made up their life. She also began writing stories, simple tales at first, but gradually growing more complex. Sam would read them and offer genuine praise, encouraging her to continue. When Sammy was 2, Grace became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to bring a child into the world. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in June of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Anna, after Sam's mother. Anna was a quieter baby than Sammy had been, content to observe the world with solemn, dark eyes. Sammy was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything, though his help was often more hindrance than assistance. Watching her 2 children together filled Grace with a contentment so deep it sometimes frightened her. "What did I do to deserve this?" she asked Sam one evening as they watched Sammy carefully show Anna his toy horse. "You survived," Sam said, pulling her close. "You kept going when everything was stacked against you. You were brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money. And you have made every single day since better than the one before." The ranch continued to prosper. By 1884, they had a herd of over 100 cattle and had built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Grace was pregnant with their 3rd child, and Sam had his eye on purchasing the adjoining property when it came up for sale. Their 3rd child, a son they named Thomas after Grace's first husband, arrived in October. It had taken Grace a long time to suggest the name, worried that Sam might feel awkward about it, but he had immediately agreed. "Thomas was part of your life, part of what made you who you are," Sam said. "I am not threatened by that, and it is a good name." Thomas was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to smile from the moment he was born. Sammy, now 6, took his role as big brother seriously, while 3-year-old Anna was simply delighted to have a baby to fuss over. Life was not without its challenges. There were drought years when the grass grew thin and the cattle suffered. There was the winter of 1885 when pneumonia tore through the territory, though thankfully their family was spared. There were the normal struggles of running a ranch, dealing with predators, fence breaks, difficult births, and market fluctuations. But through it all, Grace and Sam faced everything together. They had learned to communicate, to work through disagreements without anger, to support each other through stress and exhaustion. Their love had deepened from the initial passion of new marriage into something more solid and enduring, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. In 1887, they added another daughter to their family, naming her Elizabeth. And in 1889, their fifth child, a son named James, completed what Sam laughingly called the Anderson tribe. Grace was 36 years old and had 5 healthy children, a successful ranch, and a marriage that was everything she had ever hoped for. When she thought back to the bitter, exhausted widow scrubbing clothes by the creek in 1878, she could barely recognize herself. One evening, after all the children were finally asleep, Grace and Sam sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a ritual they had maintained over the years, this quiet time together at the end of busy days. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if I had not stopped to ask about laundry that day?" Sam asked, his arm around her shoulders. "All the time," Grace admitted. "I think about the woman I was then, so tired and hopeless. I had convinced myself that survival was the best I could hope for. You were surviving, though. That takes its own kind of strength." "Maybe. But I was not living, not really. You gave me that, Sam. You gave me a reason to hope again, to dream again. You gave me this beautiful life." "We gave it to each other," he corrected gently. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, building a ranch but not really sure why, except that it seemed like what I should be doing. You gave me purpose. You made this place a home instead of just a piece of property." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. From inside the house, they heard one of the children cry out in their sleep, then settle again, the sound of their life together. "I love you, Grace Anderson," Sam said. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end." "And I love you," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "Always and forever." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Grace thought about the incredible journey her life had taken. From Pennsylvania to New Mexico, from hopeful young bride to desperate widow to successful ranch wife and mother. She had known poverty and grief, loneliness and fear. But she had also known kindness and love, had built something real and lasting with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Sammy grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. He began taking on more responsibilities, learning every aspect of the business. Anna proved to have her mother's love of reading and writing, often spending hours with her nose in a book. Thomas was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into minor scrapes. Elizabeth had a gift with animals, able to gentle even the most skittish horse. And James, the baby, was charismatic and charming, able to talk his way out of any trouble. Grace continued her writing, eventually submitting some of her stories to magazines back east. To her amazement, several were accepted for publication. The money was modest, but the validation meant everything. Sam was immensely proud, showing the published stories to everyone who visited the ranch. In 1895, when Grace was 42 and Sam was 44, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. All 5 children, now ranging in age from 6 to 16, helped plan a surprise party. The Harper brothers, still working on the ranch after all these years, contributed a cake. Neighbors and friends from town came to celebrate. As Grace looked around at the crowded house, at the children laughing and the friends talking, at Sam grinning as he caught her eye across the room, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life had seemed impossible once, a distant dream for someone else. But she had found it, or perhaps it had found her, on a dusty street in Hillsborough when a cowboy stopped to ask about laundry. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the children were in bed, Sam presented her with a gift. It was a beautiful silver locket on a delicate chain. "Open it," he urged. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of Grace and one of Sam. "I had them taken last time I was in town. I wanted you to have something to remember this time in our lives, though I plan on giving you many more years to remember." Grace fastened the locket around her neck. "It is perfect. But Sam, I do not need jewelry to remember. Every day with you is memorable. I know, but humor me. I like giving you things." She kissed him, this man who had changed her entire world. "You have already given me everything." The ranch continued to thrive into the new century. By 1900, the Anderson Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory. They employed 8 hands year-round, had expanded their property to over 1,000 acres, and their cattle operation was known for its quality stock. Sam had achieved the legacy he wanted to build, something to pass down to his children. Sammy, now 21, had taken over much of the day-to-day operations, showing a natural talent for business. He had also begun courting a young woman from town, and Grace suspected an engagement was not far off. The thought of becoming a grandmother filled her with joy. Anna, at 19, had gone back east to attend a women's college, something almost unheard of but supported fully by both her parents. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of her studies and experiences. Thomas, at 17, was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, torn between the ranch and a desire to see more of the world. Elizabeth, 15, was training horses with remarkable skill, and several ranchers had already tried to hire her away. And James, at 11, was the baby of the family still, though growing taller by the day. Grace was 47 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her hands still bearing the marks of hard work despite years away from the laundry tub. She wore spectacles for reading and moved a bit more slowly in the mornings. But she was healthy and happy, content in a way she had never imagined possible. Sam had aged too, his hair gone gray at the temples, his face more weathered. But he was still strong and vital, still capable of a full day's work. And when he looked at Grace, his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had that day by the creek, more than 2 decades ago. On a cool autumn evening in 1901, Grace sat at her desk writing in her journal, chronicling the day's events. Sam came up behind her and read over her shoulder. "What are you writing about?" he asked. "Everything." "Nothing." The way the light looked on the mountains this afternoon, how Thomas finally decided to stay on the ranch instead of running off to seek his fortune, how Elizabeth broke that gray mare everyone said was unbreakable, just life. "Have you ever thought about writing down our story?" Sam asked. "How we met, everything that happened." "Sometimes," Grace admitted. "Though I am not sure anyone would believe it. Poor widow meets cowboy, he asks her to marry him after just a few months and they live happily ever after." "It sounds too simple." "Nothing about our life has been simple," Sam said, taking her hand. "We have worked hard for everything we have. We have faced drought and disease, economic troubles and personal challenges. We have raised 5 children, built a successful business and managed to stay in love through it all. That is not a simple story, Grace. That is a remarkable one." She squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses that matched her own. "You are right. It is remarkable. And I am grateful for every single day of it. Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. Those are the days that proved how strong we are together." The sound of hoofbeats announced Sammy's return from town, and soon the house was filled with noise as the children gathered for dinner. Grace and Sam made their way downstairs, hand in hand, ready to join their family. As Grace set food on the table and listened to the chatter around her, she thought about how far she had come from that desperate widow scrubbing laundry by the creek. She had been so certain her life was over that she would spend whatever years remained just struggling to survive. She had not imagined happiness was possible, let alone this abundance of it. Sam caught her eye across the table and smiled, and Grace smiled back, a private communication that needed no words. They had built this life together, from nothing but hope and hard work and love, and it was more than enough. It was everything. The years that followed brought more changes. Sammy married his sweetheart, a sensible woman named Martha, and they gave Grace and Sam their first grandchild, a boy named Samuel Jr., in 1903. Anna graduated from college and returned to New Mexico, taking a position as a schoolteacher in Hillsboro. Thomas finally settled down, marrying a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and starting his own small operation with his parents' help. Elizabeth continued training horses and eventually married one of the ranch hands, a quiet man who adored her. And James, when he came of age, decided to study law, wanting to use his gift for talking to help people. Grace and Sam gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Sammy and his wife, though they remained active in the business. They enjoyed this new phase of life, with more time for each other and for their growing number of grandchildren. Grace continued writing, even publishing a small book of her stories. Sam spent his spare time working with the horses and teaching his grandchildren to ride. In 1910, they celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends. The ranch house, expanded twice over the years, was filled to bursting with people who loved them. As Grace looked around at the gathering, she counted 15 grandchildren, with more surely on the way. "Did you ever imagine this when you asked me to marry you?" Grace asked Sam as they danced to the music from the hired musicians. "I imagined being happy with you," Sam replied. "But this exceeds my wildest dreams. A house full of family, a successful ranch, and you still by my side after all these years. I am a blessed man, Grace." "We are both blessed," she corrected. "Though I still say you got the better end of the deal. You married a worn-out widow with nothing to her name." "I married the strongest, bravest, most amazing woman I have ever known," Sam said firmly, "and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." They danced until Grace's feet ached and Sam was breathing hard. But neither wanted to stop, treasuring this moment of celebration and joy. Around them, their family laughed and talked, the next generation already building on the foundation Grace and Sam had laid. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Grace and Sam retreated to their favorite spot on the porch. The night was clear and cool, stars brilliant overhead. From inside, they could hear their children organizing the cleanup, grandchildren being rounded up for the trip home. "What do you think our life would have been like if we had not met?" Grace asked, a question she had pondered many times over the years. Sam considered it. "I probably would have built the ranch anyway. It was my dream, my purpose, but it would have been a lonely place, empty despite any success. I might have eventually married someone else, but it would not have been like this. It could not have been. I think I would have kept scrubbing laundry until my hands gave out or I got sick," Grace said honestly. "I was barely surviving, Sam. Without you, I do not think I would have lasted much longer. Not physically, maybe, but spiritually I was dying. You gave me a reason to live again." "We saved each other," Sam said, pulling her close. "That is what love does. It gives you strength you did not know you had." They sat in comfortable silence, breathing in the cool night air, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. The cattle lowing in the distance, an owl hooting from the barn, the soft murmur of voices from inside the house. "I love you, Grace," Sam said, as he had said countless times over their 32 years together. "More today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "And I love you," Grace replied, the words as true now as they had been when she first spoke them. "My Sam, my partner, my home." As they sat together on that porch, Grace thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. The grief and struggle, the hope and determination, the choice to take a chance on love when it seemed impossible. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped by a creek to ask about laundry, not knowing he was about to change a desperate woman's life forever. And she thought about the widow who had said yes, both to the work and later to the proposal, choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness was still possible. It had been more than possible. It had been extraordinary. The stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time, as Grace and Sam sat together in the comfortable silence of two people who had shared a lifetime. Whatever years remained to them, they would face together, as they always had. Two souls who had found each other in the vast wilderness of the West and built something beautiful from dust and hope and love. Their story was not one that would make history books or be remembered beyond their family and community. But it was a story of survival and resilience, of second chances and the courage to reach for happiness even when it seemed impossible. It was a story that mattered, to them, and to the family they had built, and to the legacy they would leave behind. As the night deepened and the air grew cooler, they finally rose and went inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Together, as they had always been. Together, as they would always be. Their love story, born on a dusty street in Hillsborough, New Mexico in 1878, would continue until their final days, a testament to the power of taking chances and the transformative nature of love. And Grace knew, with absolute certainty, that she would not change a single moment of it.